Hello, I'm A.D. Baker, and it's my pleasure to be introducing our keynote speaker today. Several years after his introduction to America as the original apprentice, Bill Rancic continues to be an entrepreneur. He is a sought-after motivational speaker, real estate developer, and author. His most recent book, his first work of fiction, comes out next month. It's called First Light. Bill co-authored the book, I Do, Now What, with his wife, Juliana Rancic, who is the E! Network Fashion Police and Red Carpet host. He also wrote Beyond the Lemonade Stand, a book geared for students to help them learn how to access their skills and abilities at a young age. In addition, he wrote the New York Times bestseller, You're Hired, How to Succeed in Business and Life. Bill is also the co-owner of RPM Italian and Steak in Chicago and DC. When Bill is not busy with business, he enjoys giving back. He's made several trips to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquakes. He's also an active board member of the Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. Please help me welcome Bill Rancic.
Hey guys. Whoa. How's everyone doing today? Well, it is good to be here, I'll tell you that. It's great to be in Nashville, one of my favorite cities. Great to be in a room full of so many professionals. But I got to be honest, it's great to be in a room full of adults. And I'll explain. My sister Karen works for me. I kind of have a family business. And she handles all these events that I get to go do. And she has a hard time saying no to people when they call. And she recently got a call from a young woman who was part of the Delta Gamma sorority house at Purdue University, and this woman called up and asked if I would come and speak at Purdue on behalf of the Delta Gamma sorority house. And my sister said that I would love to. And I got to be honest, I was kind of looking forward to it. I thought I'm going to go to a college town, I'll be the big man on campus, this is going to be a lot of fun. And two of my buddies found out I was going, and they wanted to come with me. So we got our suits on, we're heading out of the house to go to the airplane. As we're walking out the door, there's my wife, Juliana, and she starts laughing. And I said, Juliana, what in the world is so funny? She said, well, you guys think when you get there, you're going to be the big men on campus. But what's really going to happen is when you get there, everyone is going to think that you're there for Parents' Weekend. And I hate when my wife was right. Because lo and behold, I got there, and I'm at the Delta Gamma sorority house, and I'm meeting all these people, and this young woman came running up to me, and she starts going on how she always watched me on that Apprentice show and never missed an episode, and she's going on, and I'm kind of smiling. And then she went on to tell me that she was in the 6th grade when the show was on. It gets better. And that her mom was really the big fan. So I felt really old really fast. But it got me to thinking, you know, that first season of that business competition show that I was able to win was over 13 years ago. I mean, there's probably a lot of people in this room who were in 6th grade 13 years ago. But I got to travel all over the country and all over the world after winning that show, and it was certainly something that changed my life. But everywhere I go, people will stop me, and they always ask me the same question. Doesn't matter where I'm at. They always ask me whether or not I knew I was going to win that business competition show when I first started taping it. And I'm always very honest with people. I had no idea. I was competing with 15 other contestants. We had folks from Harvard and Yale and all these fancy business schools from around the country. I was just a small business owner from Chicago. And I go on to tell those people that I didn't know where I was going to stack up in the mix. But I tell them that if they were to ask my mom claims she knew I was going to win that show when I was 10 years old. And when I was 10 years old, my mom knew that I had a trait that was a little bit different than the rest of my sisters. And it happened on my parents' wedding anniversary weekend. My mom and dad were going out of town to celebrate their wedding anniversary, and they wanted to spend some quality time alone. So they shipped me off to my grandmother's for the weekend. And I wasn't happy about it, but I went. And I woke up Saturday morning, and there was my grandmother in the kitchen cooking breakfast for me. And I was probably like many of you, I was very inquisitive. I would always ask a million questions. What goes here? How does this work? Why are you doing that? So I started inundating my grandmother with all these questions, and she decided she was going to pull me in the kitchen that day, and she was going to teach me how to cook. So I spent all day in my grandmother's kitchen mastering the art of making pancakes. Blueberry pancakes, chocolate chip, banana, you name it, I could make it. So I went to bed that night, and I woke up Sunday morning, and I popped out of bed, and I ran into her kitchen, And the first thing I did is I picked up her old rotary telephone, and I called all the old ladies who lived on my grandmother's street, and I invited them to come over for a pancake breakfast. Well, these women loved it. Thought it was the neatest thing they'd ever seen. And they ate their breakfast, and they left. And as soon as they left, I started clearing their plates away from the table. And as I started clearing their plates away from the table, I made a rather interesting discovery. You see, I discovered that each and every one of these ladies left a $5 bill underneath her plate. I said, I'm onto something here. So I took that money, I put it in my pocket, and I kept my mouth shut. And I went back home, and the week went by. And Friday afternoon, the school bus dropped me off in front of my parents' house, and I went running in the front door, demanding that my mom take me to my grandmother's for the weekend. Well, this went on for the next 5 weekends, and my parents couldn't quite understand this new relationship that I'd formed with my grandmother. I suppose I should say partnership. And then my mom was in my room one day, and she was putting something in one of my drawers, and she made a rather interesting discovery of her own. She found a stack of $5 bills in my sock drawer. And she, as any good mother would, panicked a little bit and immediately sat me down and demanded to know where a 10-year-old boy was able to come up with all this money. And I had to fess up I was running a makeshift restaurant out of my grandmother's house. My mom didn't find it funny. She put the business to an end immediately and claimed I was fleecing these old ladies out of their Social Security checks. But when I look back on that experience, whether I knew it or not at the age of 10, and of course I didn't, I possessed a trait that is so important if anyone wants to find success. And I hope everyone in this room has it. And that trait is having the ability to recognize an opportunity, but more importantly, seizing that opportunity. Opportunities to enhance your patient's experience, opportunities to make the best use of the time when they're in the waiting room, opportunities to strengthen your marriage, your faith with God, your relationship with your neighbor, right? It doesn't just apply to business, it applies to life. Most people go through life and they've got blinders on, and they let opportunities pass them by one, by one, by one. So for me, that was something that I had early on, and that was my start to becoming an entrepreneur. It began in my grandmother's kitchen making pancakes. And just to give you guys a little bit of background on me, I grew up in Chicago in a very middle-class family. Both of my parents were educators. And I worked my way through college, starting a boat wash and wax business. And when I got out of college, I took a job selling metals for a company. And I'd been on the job about, 3 months, and I watched something happen that was really alarming. There was a fellow who'd been with this organization for 30 years. He was the first guy in the office. He was the last guy to leave. And he came into work one day after 30 years of service, and the two owners of this metals company were sitting in his office waiting for him, and they fired the guy on the spot. And I watched this guy pack up his office, and they marched him out to the parking lot, just like you see in the movies. And as his car pulled away from that building, it hit me right here. And I said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. I'm going to go work for an organization that values their employees, or I'm going to start my own. And I left the office that day determined to find the right opportunity to seize. And I searched, and I searched, and I searched, and I'll never forget the first call that I got. It was my buddy Kyle called me up. He said, Bill, I got a friend of a friend who's selling a bar on the west side of Chicago. He's moving back to Greece. He's going to let this thing go for a really good price. You should really take a look at it. So I said, Kyle, that's great news. Set up an appointment for me on Saturday. I'll be there at noon. So Saturday comes, and I get in my car, and I'm driving over to this bar on the west side of Chicago. And as I'm driving over there, I'm envisioning myself as the next Sam Malone from Cheers, right? Most of you kids don't know who the hell Sam Malone is, right? Man, I'm old. He was a really cool dude on a show in the 80s called Cheers. But I'm envisioning myself as this guy. And as I pull into the parking lot, my heart sinks. Now, my buddy had only given me the address of the bar. He had never mentioned the name of it, and I didn't think anything of it until that particular moment. And I see the name of the bar right above the door, and the name of the bar was called The Aftermath. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't have a good feeling about it. And I open up the door, and I meet the owner of this place, and he was the fastest talking salesman I'd ever met. And he's got his arm around me, and he's telling me how I'm going to be a millionaire if I buy this place, and it's such a moneymaker. And then he starts walking me around, and as he starts walking me around, it occurred to me that the Aftermath was no ordinary bar. The Aftermath was a bondage bar. I can't make this stuff up, man. Like, I'd never been in one of these places before, and I hope none of you have either. although there was a guy in the back nodding his head as if he'd been familiar with it. But he's showing me these different contraptions and devices that they have, and my heart's beating out of my chest. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get out of here? And I quickly assessed the situation, and I said, just give him the courtesy of a walkthrough. And I continue the tour, and he says, Bill, I'm going to bring you into the real moneymaker here. And he brings me into the basement, and he shows me what they call the dungeon room. And yeah, you know what a dungeon room is? Oh my goodness. You guys better, we're going to party with her tonight. Wow, Nashville. I thought this was the Bible Belt. My word. That's okay. It's okay. Embrace it. Embrace it. However, I was not familiar with the dungeon room like some of the ladies in the room. And I'm standing there, and I and I look over at this fella, and I said, sir, I really want to be involved in a business where my family can help me. And I don't think my 65-year-old mother is going to be up for work in the dungeon room at 4 in the morning on a Saturday. So I left there, and I kept searching and searching and searching. And about 6 months into my search, I was sitting at this outdoor cafe, and these 3 European guys sat down at the table next to me. And they pulled out the biggest cigars I'd ever seen. And they were smelling these cigars and the way they were lighting these cigars. It was like an idea came down from the heavens and hit me like a bolt of lightning. I said, I'm going to start the first ever Cigar of the Month Club. No one had ever done this. I'm going to send 5 cigars to people's homes. I'll generate a newsletter to teach them about these cigars, and I'll put a little gift card in the box as well. So I finished up at the cafe. I paid my bill, and I immediately went over to my buddy John's house, and I pitched John on the idea, and he was on board. So we decided we were going to become business partners, and we came up with $24,000 between the two of us. We actually had a third guy. We each kicked in 8. We found a silent investor, and he kicked in $8,000. So we decided to make our world headquarters in my buddy's 400-square-foot studio apartment. I mean, it was tiny. And we pushed his bed in the corner, and we got some used desks and some used computers. And I got 7 1-800 phone lines piped in this little apartment. And I was ready to get this business up and running, but there was one thing I had to do. I had to go in, and I had to leave my job at the metals company. And I went in there, and I sat down with the 2 owners, and I looked them in the eye, and I said, I think I'm going to be a millionaire one day. I said, and this is my idea. And you know what they did? They laughed. They laughed. They said, a Cigar of the Month Club, that's the craziest idea we've ever heard. It's so crazy that we're going to keep your office here, because when you run out of money in 6 weeks, we're going to hire you back, but with a 20% pay cut. Not quite the words of encouragement I was hoping for. But I left there, and I was determined to prove these guys wrong, right? I know many of you run offices, and you're always trying to grow the number of patients you get through the door and enhance the quality. And I needed to do the same thing, right? My job now was the same as yours. I had to reach as many people as I could and let them know what I was doing. And I didn't have a lot of money for an advertising campaign. So I went back to that little apartment, and I sat down at the used computer that I got from my brother-in-law, Mike, and I typed a letter. And in the letter, I explained how this Cigar of the Month Club worked. And at the end of the letter, I asked for help. And I took the letter and I put it inside of an envelope, and I put the envelope inside of a box because I knew a box would always get opened before an envelope. And I put some cigars in there, and then I went to a local costume shop, right? Halloween's right around the corner. And I bought a pair of these thick Coke bottle nerd glasses that you'd see on a Halloween costume, and I taped a little note right on the bridge of those glasses. And the note read, please take a closer look at my business idea. And I took the glasses and I put them on the cigars that were on top of that envelope, and I sealed the box up, and I made 10 of them. And I sent them out to the top 10 morning drive radio shows in Chicago. Now, this was back in 1994 when all the radio was regular radio. We didn't have satellite radio. And I sent them to the top 10 morning radio shows. And a week later, I got a call. I got a call from the producer of the #1 morning drive radio show in Chicago at the time. It was the Jonathan Brandmeier Morning Radio Show. And she said, Johnny, we'll have you on his show for 5 minutes to talk about the Cigar of the Month Club. She said, make your 5 minutes count. And when we're in business, 5 minutes can mean the difference between keeping a customer and losing a customer, between winning and losing. 5 minutes is a long time. And I went to the radio station the morning I'm supposed to, and I meet this Brandmeier guy, and boy, we hit it off. And my 5 minutes turned into 35 minutes at the heart of morning rush hour when everyone's in their car listening to their radios. And then Brandmeier starts telling his listeners how he's been a member of this Cigar of the Month Club for years. I was panicking. I didn't know what to say. He said he'd given it to his brothers for Christmas and they loved it. I mean, this guy's going on and on and on. But he was a brilliant marketer because he kept giving out my 1-800 number every 15 or 20 seconds. So I finished the interview. I'm all excited, and I leave the building, and I couldn't get a cab that day in Chicago because there was a huge convention going on. So I sprint back to the apartment where our office was, and I kick the door open, and I'm all out of breath, and I see my partner, John. He has one phone on his left ear, one on his right ear. Every phone we have in that little apartment is ringing. And I leap over, and I pick up the first phone I can get my hands on, and I take an order from this woman, and she orders a 12-month subscription to the Cigar of the Month Club. I had to stop, and I had to say, lady, are you sure? It's $40 a month. That's a lot of money. Well, she was sure. So I hung up the phone, and I looked over at John. I said, John, it looks like we're going to be in business for at least a year because we've got a 12-month subscription we need to fulfill here. But recognizing opportunity and seizing it. I took that same letter, and I sent them to radio stations in New York, in Los Angeles, Seattle, all across the country. And all these radio stations were having me on the air, and it wasn't costing me a penny because I had knowledge, right? Cigars were really popular at the time, right? All these magazines were coming out, and all the Hollywood folks were seen smoking cigars, Demi Moore and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was providing content, much like your business, right? The dental industry. You can be providing content, especially this time of year, tips for avoiding cavities around Halloween. I mean, there's so many ways you could become your own PR agent, right? You just have to look for those opportunities to take advantage of. So I got on all these radio shows all across the country. And when you're someone who is always looking for opportunities to take advantage of, oftentimes you're never satisfied, right? You challenge the status quo even when the status quo is working. You try to take a good idea and make it better, make it more efficient, make it more profitable. And that's the way my mind works. And I said to myself, man, this is working with radio, but how can I get these phones to ring even more? Anyone? TV, you got it. I thought to myself, I'm going to get on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Right? I really believed that since Oprah was from Chicago, I was from Chicago, I thought, what a great segment. Me and Oprah sitting on the couch having a cigar together, right? How crazy was I? So I modified the letter, and I went to that local costume shop, and I bought every pair of those Coke bottle nerd glasses I could get my hands on, and I made 50 of these packages. And I sent them out to every single talk show on television. And a week went by, and I didn't get a call. 2 weeks went by, I didn't get a call. It was Thursday of that third week. I remember it like it was yesterday. My phone rang, and it was a call from the first television show producer I'd ever gotten. However, it was not the Oprah Winfrey Show. I got a call from the producer of the Danny Bonaducci daytime talk show. You guys know who he was Danny Partridge from the Partridge Family, right? I don't know where he is today. He may be incarcerated. But he had a nationally syndicated daytime TV show back in '94 that was on the air for, I don't know, maybe 10 weeks before it got canceled. I got on that show twice in 10 weeks. Now, I'm going to share with you a story because when you're out marketing, when you're out promoting, when you're trying to grow, it's important that you leave your comfort zone, right? Because oftentimes we get caught in our comfort zone and we don't want to stretch, we don't want to push ourselves. And I learned that very early on when I got a call from the Danny Bonaducci show producers. They called me up, they said, Bill, come on in. Their studios were on the north side of Chicago, and we want to talk to you about putting your cigars on our unique gifts for the holiday show. So I go up there and I sit down with these ladies, and I'm there about 10 minutes, and they start negotiating a deal with me. And they said, we'll put your cigars on our unique gifts for the holiday show, but we'd like you to do our eligible bachelor show in return. And I think, oh man. And I counteroffer them back. I really needed to get sales up, right? I want these phones to ring for the holidays. So I said, I'll do it, but I'd like to bring my buddy Carson on with me. Carson was a lifelong pal of mine. I said, I want to have someone to share this wonderful experience with. And they agree. And I leave there, and I get in the car, and I call up Carson. I said, Carson, have I got some great news? We're going to be on this nationally syndicated show. They're going to be setting us up with models from Paris, right? This is what they told us. So it wasn't a hard sell at all. Carson was on board. And yeah, you would be too, right? I heard that laugh. And they send a stretch limousine to pick us up the day we're supposed to shoot this. And me and Carson are in the back of this limousine. I'd never been in a limousine until that day. And we're high-fiving each other on the way over thinking, man, we have arrived. Like we're in a limo, models from Paris, this is going to be amazing. And we're there about a half an hour. And I immediately realized why they had sent the limousine to pick us up. They were afraid once we got there and found out what the show was really titled, if we had our cars there, we'd be more likely to leave. You see, they conveniently changed the title of the show to Dateless and Lonely for the Holidays. Carson's running for the door. I'm grabbing him by the back of the shirt collar. Carson, you got to help me out, man. Like, no one watches this show. None of our friends watch daytime television. You know, just, I would do this for you. You got to help me because I need to get my products on the Uniquest for the Holiday show. So he agrees, and we go through what is still to this day one of the most humiliating experiences of our lives. And they happen to air that particular episode Thanksgiving Day. Who here works on Thanksgiving Day? You're home, you're prepping the turkey, you got the TV on, right? It was the highest rated show this guy, Danny Bonaducci, has ever seen in the history of his show. And it was rather embarrassing. Our phones rang for weeks, like, you guys are dateless and lonely for the holidays, you know. But anyway, I did that in exchange for getting my products on the Uniquest for the Holiday show. And lo and behold, they held up their end of the bargain, and then I was able to get our products on Good Morning America and on CNN. And within the first 30 days, we had those phone lines in that little apartment. We had over 1,000 members getting these packages sent to their home each and every month. And then Father's Day came that summer, and we picked up 4,000 additional members. And then the next holiday season came, and we picked up 7,000, and then 8,000, and this thing kept, we quickly obviously moved out of the apartment. That lasted about 2 or 3 months, and we were politely asked to move out. But it kept growing and growing and growing for years. And then the late 90s came, and the dot-com boom started to take off, and people were changing the way they were buying their gifts, and they were falling out of love with the of the month club concept. And I said to myself, whoa, this world is changing around me. I need to adapt, I need to react, I need to adjust, and I need to be agile, because if I'm not, I will become extinct. And the same goes in most businesses. We're changing at a pace in this world faster than we've ever seen. And those who react and adapt and are agile are the ones who are able to survive. Those who don't go away. And I slowly but surely shifted the way I sold cigars to my customers. And I started selling to casinos and resorts and country clubs all over the country, convenience stores, changing gears. Now my competitors, they were doing the beer of the month and the wine of the month, and they said, you're crazy. This is just a blip in the radar. You know, we don't need to change. We've been doing so well for the last 9 years. Why would we change? And they kept their blinders on. And both those guys, who I know, filed for bankruptcy within 2 years of when I made the change. So the moral of the story is you got to be able to have peripheral vision. You got to be willing to see what's around you and adjust and change. So I was able to sell that business in 2001. And just after I'd sold that business, I started developing real estate. And about a year after I started developing real estate, I got a call from this girl I went to college with from her mom. And her mom called me up, and her mom was a talent agent for kids in Chicago. And she said, I got some crazy facts that came across my desk. There's a new show. They're looking for business people to compete, and if you win, it could be an incredible opportunity. She said, what do you think? I said, well, can you send me an email and I can take a look at what this is all about? She said, no, I made you an appointment on Thursday, 3 o'clock, you better be there. And I went to this appointment because she was the kind of lady you didn't want to say no to. And I met with these producers from Hollywood, and they started explaining the concept of this show. And they told me they had 215,000 people who had applied. And they narrowed it down, and they asked me if I'd be part of the final 50, and I said I would. And then, lo and behold, I got asked to compete on the show. And it was the early days of reality television. This is in 2003, if you can believe it. And it was something I'd never experienced. I was a little reluctant to do. I'll never forget one of my sisters said, thank God that I'm married and I have a different last name, because she was embarrassed I was going on a reality TV show. She later changed her tune when we found out it was a hit. But I competed. And one by one, the competition started to fade. And you could tell those who had that entrepreneurial mindset versus those who didn't. And you don't have to work for yourself to have an entrepreneurial mindset. When you have that entrepreneurial mindset, you have that never quit attitude. You think like an owner. You take responsibility. And you don't get mired in all the politics and the backstabbing and the game playing, right? You let your merit speak for yourself. And one by one, the competition started to fade. And then before I knew it, it was me and one other competitor left. And he was a smart guy. He had his MBA from Harvard. And the decision was made, and I got hired on. And it was a moment I will never forget. But my celebration literally lasted a moment because I was immediately whisked away. And I was sent on a 2-week tour of all the talk shows. You know, the Today Show and the Tonight Show and Larry King and Ellen and you name it, the View. And I finished all those talk shows. I often thought, where were they, in 94 when I was stuck doing Danny Bonaducci? I could have used them then. But I finished that tour and I made my way back home to Chicago. And I started to have a moment of reflection. And I said to myself, why me? What separated me from the pack of all these people who wanted to win? Started out with 215,000 people, and I was the last one standing. And I think there were 3 reasons why I was able to win this, and I think these are why people are successful in life. The first one is I understood and embraced a term called practical execution. Now, what does that mean? Well, practical execution means that actions speak louder than words. Most people that you're going to know in life are going to talk one hell of a game. They're going to run this marathon, they're going to climb this mountain, they're going to write this book, they're going to do this for their office, this number of patients, this number of dollars in revenue, but the majority of them will never deliver. When you understand and embrace the term practical execution, you put your head down, you keep your mouth shut, and you let your actions speak louder than your words. And ever since I was a little boy, my dad always used to tell me, show me, don't tell me. I don't want to hear it, I want to see it. And that's a motto that I've tried to live my whole life by. Secondly, I was agile. I know I talked about that a little while ago. But on The Apprentice, most people only use one management style and one strategy. And every week we were given a different business to start, right? And they stayed in that comfort zone. Maybe it was the way they learned in school, or maybe it was the way that they, were taught from a job right out of school or out of high school or wherever they worked first. And they never adjusted or reacted based on the changing environment. It's not one size fits all. When you're agile, you're looking around, you're saying, well, wait a minute. These people who are now my employees were just fired. Maybe I should manage them a different way than I would a normal team of people. And a lot of people had a hard time with that. So it's about practical execution. It's about agility. And lastly, it's about risk. It's about understanding risk, respecting risk, and converting risk into success. Now, success is a funny word, and I often wonder, why are some people successful in this world, and statistically many not? And that is a hard question to answer, but my answer is very simple, and it comes down to one word, and that word is fear. I don't know if you knew this, but when we're born into this world, we're only born with 2 natural fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And every other fear we have is learned. And so many people are afraid they're going to fail, they're afraid they're going to make a mistake, they're afraid what their friends or their coworkers are going to say about an innovative idea that they never even try. In my opinion, that's the biggest failure of them all. I think it was Emerson who once said, always, always, always do what you're afraid to do, and success will find you. So obviously I know all about fear. I was on this show where there were 30 million people watching, a lot of pressure. And after the show, I got to meet some brilliant people. And one fellow I got to meet was a fellow who owned a major construction company and built a lot of the buildings in New York. His name was Greg Cuneo. And he was the chairman of a big construction company there. And he was teaching me how high-rises were built. And he taught me, I think, one of the most important lessons in management. And he did it in his own way. And he was this big burly guy from Brooklyn. He had this thick Brooklyn accent. He was rather intimidating at first, because I didn't know him. But he turned out to be one of the smartest guys I know. And as I was leaving his office one day, he turned to me with this thick Brooklyn accent, and he said, "Hey, kid," he said, "be the conductor." And I said, "That sounds great. Have a good night." Now, I didn't know what he meant by that. And as I left there, I was riding back into Manhattan, and I started to think about the conductor. Was he referring to the conductor of a locomotive? What was this guy getting at? And then it hit me. He was referring to the conductor of an orchestra. You see, the conductor of an orchestra has all these expert musicians in his or her pit, and they play their instruments to absolute perfection. The conductor himself or herself is not an expert at playing every one of those instruments, but he gets them to make beautiful music. The moral of Greg's lesson was, if we want to be good managers, right, we can't play every single instrument because we're going to stunt our growth, and the music won't sound too good. And I think a lot of people, they let their egos get in the way. Don't tell me how to use social media. I know what I'm doing, right? I know how to reach the next millennial, customer to come into our clinic. Don't tell me how to work this accounting program, whatever the case may be, right? We let ourselves hinder our growth because we're feeding our egos. And a good manager says, I'm going to find people who are smarter than I am. I'm going to find someone who is an expert at social media. I'm going to find someone who can help me get on the morning talk shows and the morning radio shows to talk about my business and why I'm such a valuable member of this community. I'm going to find someone who can help me find a new location for I'm not going to take it on myself. I'm going to conduct. So I think part of being a good conductor is being a good people watcher. Any good people watchers in the room? Anyone like people watching? No, really? 3 people? Well, we got to change that, guys, because people watching is so valuable. You can learn so much good and bad by people watching. And over the last 13 years, I've met probably some of the most successful entrepreneurs our generation has ever seen. You name it, I've met them, and I've studied them. And I asked myself, why are these people all in that rare air, right? What makes them different? And they all have completely different personalities, but I identified 3 traits that they almost all have to a T. And I'm trying to emulate these traits. The first one is that they're all good decision makers, right? They arm themselves with knowledge, and they make decisions in a timely manner, and they don't let those opportunities pass them by. Majority of people go through life, and they've got one foot on the boat and one foot on the pier, and they don't know whether to go to sea, they don't know whether to go to land, and at the end of their careers, they look back, and they realize that they never got anywhere, and they have tremendous regret. When you arm yourselves with knowledge, you see those opportunities, and you're able to grab a hold of them and do something with it. Secondly, they're all creative. These people who are in that rare air find creative ways to market themselves, market their brands, market their products. They find their version of those Coke bottle nerd glasses, and they break through the clutter, right? It's easy to buy a simple ad, but it gets lost, especially in this day and age. The guys who are in the rare air and the ladies who are in the rare air find creative ways to break through all that. So they're good decision makers, they're creative, and lastly, and probably most importantly, they have that never quit, never make excuse mindset. And most people today go through life, and the minute times get tough, or there's a little dip in the sales, or things aren't going the way that they had planned, the first thing they do is this. They point to their left and they point to their right, and they blame everyone and everything around them. But the people who are in that rare air, they do this. They point the finger at themselves, and they realize that at the end of their careers, there is no one else to blame but themselves. And they find solutions for their problems. So I've been around some extremely successful entrepreneurs. And then a few years ago, I did a show for the A&E network called We Mean Business. And it was a show where I got to go in and help make over businesses that were failing. And I did some medical offices. I did a doggy daycare center. I did 10 of them. And I integrated myself into their lives, their personal lives, their work lives, everything about them I knew. And I asked myself when I finished the 10 different businesses, I said, why are they all failing? And these people were doing just subpar, way beneath their potential. And I came up with 3 traits that each one of these 10 business owners had. And the first one is they were all reactive rather than proactive, right? We talked about ego a little bit earlier. See, they're reactive rather than proactive because they feel important when they can solve a problem. When someone comes to them, They come to the manager and they say, oh my God, we got a crisis over here, and then they can solve that problem. It's a way they can beat their chest. The smart ones are anticipating the problems and coming up with the solutions before the problem even rears its head. Secondly, it's interesting, they all surround themselves around negative people. Interesting study that I read, it said the majority of the people we come into contact with on a daily basis are negative. The study went on to say that you're never going to be able to eliminate these people from your lives, but when you're aware of who they are and what their intentions are, you negate their power. And I can assure you this, when you're on a path upward, when you're achieving extraordinary things in your life, there is always going to be those people around you who are jealous, who are envious, who wish they had your drive, your ambition, your vision, your creative spirit, but they don't. So you know what they try to do? They try to pull you down in order to build themselves up. And it may be people who are closer to you than you think. I was at a fundraiser a couple years ago, and I ran into the two owners of that metals company. And these guys came running up to me. We knew you were going to be successful. I said, I'm not so sure about that, buddy. So they're reactive rather than proactive. They surround themselves around negative people. And lastly, it's about potential. Potential is probably the best God-given asset we have, yet it's truly the most underutilized. And I really believe that when we're born into this world, God gives us a certain amount of currency in the form of potential. And it's up to us to make it grow. It's up to us to make it multiply. Yet so many of us don't do anything with it. So many of us let people regulate our potential. We let people put limits on what we can and cannot do in life. And I want to end with the story because I know I'm going long. Sorry, guys. But someone who I think really understood the power of potential was a coworker of my wife's, and someone I got to work with on The Apprentice for a few seasons when we were judges, is Joan Rivers. And everyone in this room, I think, knows who she is, right? And she passed away about 2 years ago, almost to the day. And Juliana and I were at her funeral in New York City. And after the funeral, maybe 100 of us got invited back to her apartment for a little reception. And we're back at her apartment, and I noticed that there were probably 80 people there who all had these little stick pin pieces of jewelry on their lapel of a bumblebee. And I turned to Juliana and I said, what's with all the bumblebees? She said, I don't know. She said, Joan always considered herself a bumblebee. So we left, and I got back to our hotel, and I got on the computer and I Googled bumblebee. And the first thing that came up, I got it. I now understood. Because the first thing that pops up is the bumblebee, by all reasonable laws of physics, was never meant to fly. Its wing-to-weight ratio should prohibit it from ever getting liftoff from the ground. But no one ever told the bee that, and the bee flies. You see, Joan was the bumblebee because she didn't let people tell her whether she could or couldn't fly. Everyone said to her, you can't host a late-night talk show. You're a woman. She did it. They said, you can't sell $100 million worth of jewelry on the Home Shopping Network. She did it. She was able to fly because she didn't let people tell her what her potential was and what it was not. And I think if we go through life not letting people tell us whether we can and cannot fly, and if we're agile, we're creative, and we adopt that never quit, never make excuse mindset, success is inevitable. And I always end every speech with this. In life and in business, there's going to be highs and lows, right? That is a fact. I can guarantee that. But tough times don't last. Tough people do. I want to thank you folks for having me here. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think we're gonna open it up to some questions. If anyone has any questions, I'm assuming you do. You can just raise your hand and you can shout it out, and I can repeat it so the rest of the room can hear it. Yes, sir. Am I still friends with Trump? Well, I worked for him for a long time. I haven't talked to him in about a year and a half or so, but certainly keeping a close eye on what's happening. Yeah. Anyone else? How many businesses did I try to start before I succeeded? Well, it's funny. When I was growing up, I had a lot of different businesses, when I was a kid. And when I when I got out of college, I didn't start any, but I looked at a lot. And what I did was I reverse engineered it. So I would take a business idea, and most people try to talk themselves into it. I would do the exact opposite. And I would look at, I looked at everything from starting a used sporting goods store to a Subway sandwich shop to you name it. And I just did the reverse engineering and was able to kind of deduct that it wasn't going to be for me, Anyone else? Yes, sir? Is there another entrepreneur that I admire and I want to go into business with, and why? Oh, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs out there. A lot of great innovators. Someone once told me, in fact, it's my business partner in the restaurant business, and he's a brilliant guy. He's been in the business for 45 years. Created brands like Maggiano's and the Corner Bakery, and he's extremely successful. And he said, when two good people get together, it's impossible to have a bad deal. But when a good person gets together with someone who's not so good, it is impossible to have a good deal. So I think, it's all about character. It's about finding the right partnership. It's about staying in your own lane. And it's about understanding who's doing what. And I'm in the restaurant business with two other partners. We own the RPM restaurant group. And RPM stands for the three owners, Rancic, Saltis, and Melman. And we all have different traits. And, Doug Saltis is our chef partner, and he's incredible pedigree, and Melman's are the operators and been in the business forever. But we all know our roles, and oftentimes I get most of the credit. And I think a lot of people would have a hard time with that, because they're certainly doing a lot more work than I am. But we all know our roles, and me and my wife can get people in the door, and we can market it and help with the design. But if the food isn't amazing, and the service isn't above and beyond, and the atmosphere isn't great, people will never come back again. And it's a partnership that works. I often say a band can only have one lead singer. And oftentimes why the big bands break up is because everyone wants to be the front man. And that doesn't always work. So, for us, sometimes I get more credit than I probably deserve. But it's working. And we all know our role, and we stay in our lane, and we're accountable for what we're supposed to do. Yes, ma'am. So she was saying, I brought up the notion that people who are failing are reactive rather than proactive, and that's true. And I think oftentimes we get complacent, and anyone, if you're thinking forward and you're anticipating and you have a little bit of healthy paranoia, you can anticipate problems that might come up, and hopefully they never do. But if you're smart and you're planning and you're anticipating, by you preparing for that, you'll be ready to go if it happens. It's like buying insurance. You buy insurance, you hope you're never going to have a fire or a theft, but it's ready to go just in case in case that happens. And the same is with your business. If you're anticipating, a problem with an employee, or you're anticipating a slowdown, you got to have, like a pilot. When you're flying, from New York to L.A., he's always thinking about, in case the engines go, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? There's a field there. There's a runway there. They're coming up with plans as they go, and that's kind of how you have to run your business. You can't just sit back and close your eyes, and then if the engines go out, God, I'm jinxing myself for the flight home. But you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. Yes, sir. Things are changing. He said things are changing very rapidly. Where do I see it going? Well, the world is changing faster than we've ever seen, and I'll give you an example. TV, right? Well, nowadays everything's digital, and these networks are scrambling. They're having a lot of trouble because the younger people here don't watch TV. They're watching their iPads. They're watching their phones. They're creating. People are creating content in other ways, and it's leveling the playing field. Well, the same goes for business, right? Our reach now is so much further than it's ever been. You can be a small business and have an incredible reach and incredible customer base and not have to spend a fortune. But it's the way you use it. And obviously social media, you've heard this before, it's the future. It's not the future, it's the present. But most people misuse it. Most people are only using social media to jam products and services down people's throats. Buy this, come to that. When you provide them with content that they can use and implement in their lives, you create a bond. So in the restaurant business, I'm not just saying, hey, come in on Friday for happy hour, this or that. I'm giving them real information that they can use. Hey, if you can't come in, these are the best cuts of meat to buy at a butcher shop. Or if you're grilling out this weekend, here's the way we do it at RPM Steak. Or you like Mama DePandi's bucatini, here's the recipe. Try and make it at home. I'm providing them with useful information that makes their lives better. And in your industry, there's great ways to give them content. And it's not just always selling. They will want to come in and they will want to do business with you because you're enhancing their lives and you're not asking for anything in return. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. What business or venture did I go and do? And looking back, I should have said, what was I thinking? Well, I mean, God, there's been a lot. But I think early on when I got into the real estate business, I had my first building. My buddy called me up and he said, I want you to buy this building. I think it'll be great for you. You're just getting out of the cigar business. It's an apartment building, and you can make them luxury apartments. Renovate it, and you're going to get high dollar rent, and it's going to be great. I said, okay. And I bought the building, and I started renovating it. And I'm about 80% done, and lo and behold, I get a call one night, and I'm out to dinner, and my cell phone rings, and this guy says, this is Tommy from Busy Bee Board Up Company. Your building's on fire. When the fire department leaves, would you like us to board it up? And I thought it was my buddy Carson. I said, that's funny, Carson, right? He's getting me back for the Danny Bonaducci show. And then my phone rings again, and it's another board-up company. Well, these guys listen to, like, fire scanners. I don't know if anyone's in the board-up business, but it's pretty cutthroat business. Anyway, I left, and lo and behold, the building was on fire. Well, I bought the insurance policy from a college buddy of mine. And there's something, anyone in the insurance business here? There's something called actual value and replacement value. Well, I had actual value, which means they were valuing this 80-year-old building as if it was 80 years old. But I had completed 80% of the renovation. Long story short, I almost wound up going bankrupt. And I probably should have done a little more homework on real estate development and insurance policies and things like that. And I was able to figure it out in the end. And I used it as a growing experience, and I wound up buying more buildings, just buying insurance from a different guy. But that was one that I thought, oh man, this is it. And it caused me a lot of grief. Anyone else? Is there an open bar after this or something? I'm not familiar. Yeah. Yes, ma'am? How am I different as an entrepreneur now as a husband and father than when I was young and single? Well, time is a lot more valuable. When I was, if I had a wife and a kid, I wouldn't have been able to start that business because I was working around the clock. I was up at 5 in the morning, working till 10 at night, 7 days a week. It was a lot of long years. I didn't get paid for a long time, so that would have been challenging. Fortunately, I did it early, and I was able to kind of learn and grow. But I think I'm a lot more cautious with my time, and I'm more selective in the deals that I do. But I don't know if that comes as a result of being a husband and a father, or if it comes as a result of having the ability to be more selective. It may be a combination of both. But I'm a lot more cautious with who I do business with, having been burned by people in the past. And I think that's just how you grow, But a lot less risks, I'll tell you that, because, I don't want to, I got to think, you think about things differently when you've got a little wild man who's counting on you, Anyone else? All right, well, if that's it, guys, last and final warning, enjoy the open bar. See you guys later. Thank y'all.